Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traverse the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And as always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. We have an amazing show for you all because boarding the mothership is Ramon de Ocampo. You know him as Otto on The West Wing. He's also an award-winning Shakespearean actor and audiobook star. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars.
Hello, Mr. De Ocampo. Thank you so much for coming to the Traverse the Stars podcast.
Hi, Jeff. It's really nice to be here. Welcome to my office.
It's very cool looking. So this is where you do all your audiobook work?
I do about half of my audiobook work here. So, but yeah, so, I do, as working class actors, we have to diversify the way we work. And I'm very lucky that I still get to diversify all in performance modes. So this is one of the places that I do my audiobook work. If I'm not here, I'm in a professional audiobook studio.
So that must have been really helpful during COVID, because I imagine you could still do your entire job without leaving home.
Oh, we got really lucky, actually. I, of course, like everybody else, I didn't know what was going to happen. And then somehow audiobooks became incredibly popular during the whole COVID experience. So we just got more work, which is great. My wife and I both narrate audiobooks, and she's also a children's photographer. So as a children's photographer, you could actually do that distanced. So with a good zoom lens, she would still be out there shooting, and I'd be in here in really a padded cell, away from the world. We always say that audiobook actors are the nicest people, because most of the time we're just all alone in a cell talking to ourselves. So we're really happy to have somebody else in the booth to chat with.
That's gotta be the best way to work, not around other people. So
definitely a great way to do COVID.
Yes, indeed. There's always a silver lining to national plagues, and definitely working from home is one of them.
Working from home. We had a baby during that time too, so that was our like silver gold lining there.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah. I think it's congratulations, and then you're like, baby, that sounds exhausting. It's a time you could have really rested.
Well, I can't help to think that might be a little part of me that thinks, God, I wish I could leave the house right now.
Yeah. Well, at least I actually think that I definitely thought at least nobody else can leave the house too. It's not just me.
So having two people in the house who are doing audiobook work, is it ever competitive between two? You're like, I got an award for this audiobook, or this. Is it ever competitive between the two of you with your audio work?
I think I married the right person, because it's never been competitive between us, at least on my side. Like I've definitely been in those relationships coming up where you have felt some of that competitive bite, and give credit. Everybody was very good about it, but my wife Lauren, we're not competitive. We're actually really good partners. In fact, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't get any of the work I've done in the past 6 years, since all auditions have now gone on tape. So we have a recording studio at a visual recording studio at the other end of our house. So we're able to tape there, and we're each other's reading partners. So that's really good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's an actress as well. So, two performers and a child. A performer.
So who wants attention more, the performers or the baby?
It's really interesting. The more you work in performance, the less you need all the attention. I remember my mom, when I was really young, I got my first big stage play. I was doing Romeo and Juliet at the Kennedy Center.
Awesome.
And she was like, it was the summer of my freshman year in college, and I was going to school for acting. And my mom goes, well, I think you really found the thing that's right for you. And I was like, well, I thought it was very poetic and nice of her. And I was like, oh, why do you say that? And she was like, all of a sudden, it just doesn't seem like you need any attention. She was like, you don't seem to be, strutting your stuff or doing whatever you do. And I was like, thanks. I thought you felt my machinations,
right.
art, but no, you were just like, you're a lot quieter now. That's great.
So who were you?
She's right.
So who did you play in Romeo and Juliet?
I played Romeo.
Nice.
Romeo and Juliet 4 times. I've played 2 Romeos, a Benvolio, and a Juliet.
Oh wow, how was the Juliet?
But the Juliet is a much more interesting character. She drives that play. You know, if you look at Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is the one with all the ideas. She's the one with all the ideas. She's the one who makes the plans. She's the one who says, this is how we're getting away with this, right? And Romeo hears a rumor and freaks out. You know, everything about Romeo is like, what do you mean? First it's, I don't know. And then it's like, what do you mean they're throwing me out? And then she's got to be dead, kill myself. You know? Juliet had planned it the whole time if he had just kind of slowed his roll. So,
you know, I'm a high school English teacher, so one day we're gonna have to geek out all over about Shakespeare and only Shakespeare.
Oh, we should. You know, I've done Kate and Shrew, and I just finished Hamlet. I just closed it just a couple of weeks ago. It was my big Hamlet, it's just as hard as you think it is.
Now, I did read somewhere that you teach Shakespeare at a juvenile detention center. Is that correct, or have?
You? Yeah. I've done that for almost 20 years now, ever since I moved to LA. And, you know, the theater company that I'm with, the Antaeus Theater Company, ANTAEUS, out here in Los Angeles, has a great outreach program. We're a classical theater company that are really made up of actors sort of from the contemporary film and TV world, originally kind of like New Yorkers who came here and Angelinos who were looking for classical roots, because everything we do is so contemporary and in film and television. And one of the things that they did was really create this incredible outreach program at these penitanciaries, really. Juvenile detention centers. Here they call them camps, and they're definitely not camps. I mean, they're definitely camps, but there are a few places in LA where you'll see like camp so and so or camp this place, and you're like, that's not actually a camp. You know, nobody is in there camping.
So I say one trick I always run into when I'm trying to teach Shakespeare, and I teach Romeo and Juliet every single year.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, it's not my favorite play to read, but my favorite one to teach.
I actually think that's true of all Shakespeare.
You think so?
You know? I feel like Shakespeare's difficult to read. Even, you know, I've been a professional actor and a professional stage actor for more than 24 years or so. And I still find Shakespeare incredibly difficult to read. But what's great is if you can unlock the words, and they're all words and they're all there and they're all unlockable, it's always profound and deep and contemporary and timeless, you know, and that's why I think that Shakespeare should be studied, because you know for sure that this is going to be good. You know for sure that this writing is going to be great.
Right.
If you can unlock it, you know, and when you unlock it, all of a sudden you forget how complicated it is. Because it seems so achievable. I say that, and then in the middle of Hamlet, you feel like you're going to die. You're like, how did this guy put 1,500 lines? It doesn't end. You leave the stage. At the end, you're dead.
I mean, I agree completely. I find Shakespeare is kind of like almost like when you watch ever see one of those movies you know, like The Hunt for Red October, where it's in one language and then suddenly they just transition over to English and you're supposed to understand the difference. I feel like reading Shakespeare the same way, where you're reading Shakespeare and it feels like this weird old time language, then suddenly you don't even realize, but it just switches over and it all just clicks and makes sense. You just keep on reading it.
Oh, but definitely when you're watching it as an audience member, I always tell people who are coming to Shakespeare, especially when they give the like, oh, that's not usually what I do. I say, well, you know, there's two things to remember. Whatever you think it means, that's what it's going to mean. You know, that's what it means. That's the job of the actor. Whatever you think it means, that's it. You know, and usually if you give it 10 minutes, all of a sudden you go from Shakespeare to like Game of Thrones.
Right.
All of a sudden it's all in your head and you're like, why do I, in fact, during this Hamlet, I had some of my cousins came to see it, and they're not Shakespeare people. And they were like, I wasn't sure what to think. And she was like, I don't know why, but 10 minutes into it, I was like, I think I understand everything that's happening. And I was like, yeah, it's exactly that. You suddenly have like a click. And when you have really good actors playing it, you know, you suddenly, I think, also key into what they're doing. And as they start to work, you know, your understanding of the language jumps, you know, because you start to anticipate things, or all of a sudden you're much more taken by the story than you are by this like kind of oldie language, you know. and the language is so gorgeous. So
Yes.
it can get away from you, but it's gorgeous.
Right.
In fact, to segue to the West Wing, that's how Allison Janney and I met.
Really?
Allison Janney and I met doing Taming of the Shrew, my first shrew in the park. And she was in Shakespeare in the Park in New York. And she was our Kate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was Bartholomew and Biendello. And, I just came out of school. And, Mario Cantone was in it. Jay Sanders was our Petruchio. It was a fantastic production. It was really, really fun. And I remember Allison. I remember at the end of it asking Allison what she was up to next, and she said, "Well, I just shot this pilot for this thing, and I don't know. I love the thing. I don't know if anybody's going to watch it because who wants to see, the backstage workings of the White House, like not even the front, like I don't know. She was like, I hope. I really loved it, but I kind of remember her saying something like, and it's a bunch of us like theater nerds, that are doing it. It's a great playwright, and some of the theater guys that we kind of came up with, and I don't know if anybody's gonna watch it.
That's wicked funny. Apparently, a lot of people chose to.
Maybe I think it came. It ended up in like maybe a year later was when it started showing, and it was my very favorite show. Absolutely favorite show.
It totally is mine as well. It is one of those like comfort shows. I tend to almost loop it sometimes, because anytime I'm not sure what I want to watch, The West Wing always works, and it almost doesn't matter which episode or which season. You can just start watching it and you immediately get sucked back in, and it's like they're seeing your old friends again, and it just works.
I even, I have DVDs of it.
Same here.
But I have DVDs of it because, first because I need them, but when you go to work and you're working on set, they put you in a trailer, and the trailer always has a TV, and there's always a DVD player attached to it, which is interesting as nobody has these anymore. But I like to put it on sometimes when I'm working on sets because. Even the heartbeat of it, the rhythm of the dialogue, the way that stories are told, and even the pat way that it ends every hour, it's great to have in there to kind of, I don't know, goose your game,
Yeah.
It makes you be like, all right, I'm coming. I'm gonna. I remember I get very inspired by the work, I mean, we got to remember that, like when we watched The West Wing, I don't think anybody else knew. Well, definitely, we didn't know literally what a West Wing was. Why it was called the West Wing? What's a POTUS? That's the very first episode. POTUS is calling, and she's like, "Who's POTUS?" And he's like, "Oh no, an acronym."
Right.
When Rob Lowe was in it, right? That's his opening line is President of the United States.
Yeah, the POTUS fell off a bicycle.
Yeah, right. POTUS fell off a bicycle. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I found interesting, because you're a very decorated theater actor. Now, when I watch The West Wing, I do feel like the dialogue and the speed of the dialogue and how like the pattern between the actors is very theater-like. So did you feel that your time as a theater actor prepared you in a way for The West Wing that maybe other actors wouldn't have had?
Well, I can speak to my my experience, and I think it definitely did. And part of that, definitely Aaron Sorkin has this energy. And when I was working there, Aaron wasn't writing on it, but the writers that he brought kept this energy and this pattern, and it's this what you feel similar in David Mamet plays, and in David Rabe plays, and Tom Stoppard plays. It definitely even in Shakespeare, that there is a rhythm that occurs, and if you pay attention to the rhythm, if you honor that rhythm, you can find gold. What's interesting with contemporary work at television, and definitely with The West Wing, is that the author is literally right there being like, you can hit that place. There are other shows that actually go the opposite direction, where they're sort of like, make that your own. You know, you don't have to hit any of this. And definitely, I've worked with actors, and they're encouraged. You know, it's not necessarily that they're doing something wrong, but like they're encouraged to, you know, to mess that up some, to not pay attention to those signs. And you know, for me, I always feel like I really like language. I really like lines. You know, I heard a story. William Macy used to say when somebody was like, you know, make that your own, or you know, do it another way. And he used to say, at least this is what I heard. I can't do it any other way. That's how I do it. You know, he works on the lines like that. His work is inside the text, and I love that. I open up with good scripts, and I feel like one of the things that's helpful as an actor from the theater is that I immediately glom onto the other theater ensemble members and be like, we're an ensemble, you know. Kristen Chenoweth is over there. She's our theater girl.
Yeah.
Allison Janney, of course, Jimmy Smits. Like these are all, you know, big theater players, and they're still big theater players. And I know what they're doing is coming in here to like pass this ball. You know, nobody's trying to like throw you off your game or anything. Everybody's trying to take this story together. And I feel like, you know, immediately when you stepped on that stage that it's going to be difficult because it's good, you know,
Right.
not because anyone or anything is particularly difficult. It's that it's good.
Right.
And you want to bring your A game, you know, so swing hard and be alive. And I feel like that's theater, you know. I think where it sometimes gives me a disservice is the idea that not necessarily in the West Wing, but in other things where you're like, the script is not king. You know, there's some places where you're like, the character is king, which is doable, but when it's not in the script, it's hard to make things out of whole cloth, I think, you know. And I feel like you'd have to have like a long conversation with a writer and a producer and be like, well, what's your thoughts on this thing, you know, but they've got other things to do. So I like when it's in the script. I like when the difficulty is right there in the script, and your job is to go in there and eat it, you know. You really like punch it in, you know.
You know, I agree completely. I feel like in the West Wing, the dialogue is a part of the character. There's other shows where the dialogue just kind of moves the plot along. It's just like, you know, plot point. But with West Wing, it's part of the character. You can't separate the character from those words.
No, you can't even separate them from the punctuation. You know, they're very like the West Wing was very specifically punctuated. You knew when you were stopping. You knew when you were taking a breath. You knew how many times you had to go. Okay. It was that. There it is. It's like there's my okay. You know, somebody said okay, it was like the most used line in the West Wing.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But even though they were done in, it's sort of like almost like musically, like there's different versions of their okay, where, you know, it was that stood for multiple different words. It's, you know, just how the tone was, the pause on how long the okay lasted.
Yeah, definitely. How many ellipses you get beforehand?
Right.
Well, you know, and the West Wing kind of developed this brand new, at the time, definitely, or you know, moved over this sort of new way of shooting television. And you know, when I talked to John Spencer about it, he was like, "Oh yeah, that happened like day one." You know, he told me, he was like, "Day one, I get here, and you know, I'm thinking we've got 4 or 5 scenes that we're shooting today, and so like I'll get this done, and then I'll get that done, and okay, so that's how we're doing this." And he said somebody knocked on my door and was like, "So I've got this idea. I want to do all 5 of these scenes as a oneer." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're gonna just keep walking from this scene to that scene, and then you're gonna talk over there, and then we're gonna get from that scene to this scene." And he was like, "Oh." and they were like, "What?" You know, he said that it was a big revelation. All of a sudden he was like, "Oh, this is what we're doing." That ended up being like the whole signature of the West Wing was that walk and talk, which now seems a little odd when people do it out of nowhere, but every time you watch it in The West Wing, it was always moved by a reason to do it.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like people were like in the hallway because we're supposed to do a walk and talk. They were in the hallway to get to somebody else's office, or like at the end of this, there's a coffee.
Right.
And I always think that's important, because I feel like there's some things that people crib from shows like that. That become like, oh, we do a walk and talk to make it exciting. And I was like, I don't know if The West Wing did it just to be exciting. Well, I found it exciting, but I think it was to show the busyness of where you are. And then that, if you have to get to coffee, that's four doors down. There's no reason you can't walk and talk.
There's not enough time to screw around and just stand there. If you're, if you're talking, you got time to move.
Yeah.
Get there. When the cool thing about The West Wing, and you kind of hinted at a little bit, is that especially by season 7, it's such a massive cast. I mean, Jimmy Smits, as you say, Kristen Chenoweth. I mean, there's so many actors on that show, and it's almost like staged where every character is kind of given some moments. And as an actor yourself, as Otto, how do you kind of serve the larger scene, the larger cast? And also, I'm sure as an actor, you kind of want to take your scenes as well, and to have your moment and shine in your moment, but at the same time serve the large ensemble. Was that difficult? Was that easy to do?
I feel like, and this is obviously just my experience of it. The thing that made it feel so theatrical to me, or like a incredible piece of theater or an ensemble piece, is that I didn't feel like anybody was trying to take a special shine, or do something in particular with their moments. I really felt that the thing that was the star of The West Wing was the script. The thing that was the star of The West Wing was the story, and it never felt like a bunch of egos. It was never like, Marty Sheen being like, I'm the president, or Allison being like, how many awards, like it was never anything like that. It very much, and both of them, Martin Sheen and definitely Alan Alda and Stephen Root by season 7, like they're all theater people. And in the theater, like everybody has to pick up and take this play to the end. And that's always what it felt like. And when it was your turn to speak, you spoke, and when it was your turn to serve the story, you served the story. It never to me felt like, and now it's your day, which does happen definitely in on TV now. I definitely have been there where they're like, hey, it's your day today, so we're doing these things, and do you want to go first? Do you want to go second? Do you want us to do a close up? But it's not. It was such an ensemble. There was rarely a time where you just have two people, talking to each other. Really rare, and that was their day when it was, but usually what happens is there's 6 of you on the set, and all of you serve a big purpose, and any one of you could screw it all up. You could be chasing Janine Garofalo and Kristen Chenoweth around a circle during the campaign office, and everybody's got lines, and everybody's got to throw them in, and they don't necessarily come in an order that you think they're going to come in, but they all make sense, And so even though, say, Janine and Kristen were the more important characters because they're going to be taking the scene to the next place, anybody can screw that up, And I think like it was it says something about the writers that they cast people who they knew, we can throw them these big balls, and they will carry them. They will carry this. And at any point, if they were like, we need Otto to give a speech, they know I can, or wherever it is, they can do it. I don't know. I never really felt like it. Now is your moment for anyone, very much it felt like, all right, so we got through the first 2 things, and here's the third one. Are we ready?
So Allison Janney just didn't walk around holding her Emmys to remind people, be like, so let's do this scene. I'm just going to hold these right here. Anyone has an issue with how I'm doing things?
I mean, she might have had them in her bag or something. But Allison taught me how to memorize lines, or at least like one of the techniques that I use from line memorization. She showed me, or she was the first person to show me. I've since been shown it like 3 or 4 other times by different people. Uh, and I have shown it since to different people. But I remember when I was on the set, and I was like, how do you do this? Because, that's another thing that people don't realize, that like, when people say, there's a lot of words, it must be difficult. I think sometimes they're being facetious, but it was really difficult. When there's some people who used to say, the classic thing used to be when somebody say, how do you learn your lines? And actors would be like, well, if they think that's the hard part, that's not the hard part of acting. And I was like, I don't know. I think it's the hard part of acting. I feel like there's like a part of everybody's job which is to lay bricks, is to dig holes, put down foundations, and lay bricks, and none of that is that fun.
Right.
And memorizing is the actor's job. Like you can't find out if you can play Hamlet until you learn what is like the length of a Bible worth of lines, and until that's inside you where you can play with it, like you can't actually act anything. But she showed me a very interesting, simple line memorization technique, which is basically to take the first letter of each word and lay them out on a page and let those letters kind of give you a hint as to what the line is. Then you could use the page and the letters to kind of get yourself to a place where you could lose the script and look only at the letters. You're never going to memorize the letters. You're just sort of using them as a guide. And then eventually you just get rid of the letters and you have it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really interesting. How I learned all of Hamlet. And I think I've done that for most of my plays and TV shows for the past, I don't know, like 8-10 years now.
So because once again, as someone who's done a lot of Shakespeare, does the West Wing come the closest in the difficulty of remembering the lines and the I guess how to perform the lines as like Shakespeare? Is it that level of difficulty?
So here's something interesting. The difficulty in both Shakespeare and the West Wing is that the lines are complicated and smart, and take a level of intelligence and alacrity. You have to be sharp to be able to catch those thoughts and keep them moving, right? But it doesn't necessarily make it difficult. The most difficult are the things that are bad. The most difficult are stories that aren't good, are ones where you're like, I don't know where this dialogue comes from, or I'm often like a medical person or a scientist or something, and I'm like, I don't know what this is or why it's here. If the author knows, I can actually intuit that, because a good writer, even in the middle of like deep sci-fi, like you guys, like you're part of in the podcast, right?
Right.
Inside of deep sci-fi, the good ones, even when they're speaking kind of like created science, have thought of what that created science is. And that actually makes it much easier to comprehend, and that makes it much easier to memorize. So the West Wing and Shakespeare are actually not terribly difficult to memorize. There's just a lot of it, like there's a density to it, but like with the West Wing, there's a pattern, and the people who are writing it write it really smartly. They're not writing to create false humanisms. They've created a person who really talks and really thinks a certain way, so that when you come up to so I need to write a speech, one if he wins, one if he loses, one if he wins the popular vote and loses the electoral vote, one if he wins the electoral vote and loses the popular vote. I'm pretty sure that's literally the lines, for that speech that I did then. I just remembered it now. But even then, that's already 6-8 lines. Totally makes sense,
right?
And Shakespeare's the same way. Once you've learned to be or not to be, you cannot go off track. Like it's right there. It makes total sense why he's thinking like this, know. the difficult lines come in those times where you're like, I don't know why this person thinks this and then says this. You know, where does this come from? Why is he just giving story points? Oh, well, I don't understand. You know, that's really hard. That stuff is really hard to remember. So this was not like hard as in, I mean, challenging, but it's not like it will stay. When it goes in, it stays, and when it goes in, it clicks. It's really interesting.
So in a lot of movies and TV, the acting seems to be your turn, my turn. You know, you say a line, it's kind of a pause. This person says their line. With West Wing, it's so much more, as we said earlier, like a very rhythmic. Because it's rhythmic like that, as an actor, you must then, I assume, be more in tune with the other actor and find their rhythm. So when you're acting against somebody else's rhythm, is it hard, or is it possible that it affects how you are going to approach a scene, because now you got to match someone else's rhythm instead of waiting for your turn to speak?
Well, the interesting thing about The West Wing is there's sort of an established rhythm. Like you can feel it. As soon as you turn on The West Wing, even now, you hear them, you know, patting down the hall, you know,
Right.
you know what's snappy. And you know that actually, because I think partially because of the density in the language, you've got to move it, you know? And in fact, I feel like what was very interesting about it is where a certain level of preciousness can be had with like other shows and other genres, like and The West Wing, I think your push was like, don't be precious with it, we've got to get on, you know. And that's part of what I loved about it, is like watching what could be, I don't know, a Hallmark Hall of Fame moment, you know, since a lot of The West Wing, especially the beginning, are fables, really, you know, like new American fables, morality plays, and where somebody might take it in at the end and sort of like bring it down and have a little, well, I had this great thought, you know. The guys at The West Wing, the directors, the producers, the actors, throw it, you know, move it on. What's next? You know, that's
perfect.
that is really like how that's how it is. So I actually feel like, and maybe it's because, maybe that's why I was cast, is that I always felt like I lived inside of that rhythm, you know. I loved it so much that I never had a hard time with that rhythm. I don't have a hard time with any of that Aaron Sorkin rhythm. I feel like I think on that level, you know, that particular kind of, you know, these are smart people trying to understand something, trying to comprehend something together, usually is what it is, you know, tossing a ball. I smile thinking of like that kind of rhythm. I don't see, I think there's great TV on now. I don't see that kind of writing on right now, you know.
I'd agree 100% because it's hard. It's hard to probably write at that level of rhythm and that level of quality. And there's only going to be the one Sorkin in many ways. I mean, you can mimic him, but the moment you try mimicking him, people now say that's Sorkin. You know, you can't just be like quietly, subtly be, you know, take his lines.
Yeah, and I definitely have seen. I've definitely been like, I've seen TV shows recently where I've been like, oh, they're trying to crib Sorkin stuff, and it just seems so cribbed, you know?
right.
It seems so shoehorned in there. And I was like, I feel like I can, and it's weird because you can feel the writer in there, and you're like, oh, if that guy just let himself do what he does and he didn't have to do this other thing, you know. But he, you know, the person is very, he's being held back doing somebody's excellent writing, you know. Aaron's excellent, but it's you can feel somebody being held back because they're not being true necessarily to themselves, or you know, you hear a piece of dialogue go one way and then sort of there's this okay, do you want to, you know, and then off they go and they're like, Donna, and then, you know, and you're like, I don't know what happened, but they like did a Sorkin there, like they pulled a West Wing, and that didn't work, you know.
So when you got the role as Otto on The West Wing, once again about season 7, what did they tell you about Otto? Because one thing about the character, they didn't offer a lot of backstory of who he is. And I don't know if they even referenced how he showed up. I think he just suddenly was in the show. They didn't it wasn't like, hey, we hired Otto. It's just like, they just talked to him and you're just there. So what did they tell you about the character? Did you create your own backstory for the character?
Well, it was very interesting. The idea was he was he was Jimmy's speechwriter. So that was his actual, like he's definitely you know one of the like presidential aides, or he's a staffer, right? But at least when I was brought in, or when they told me, they were like, he's the speechwriter. He's the guy who's writing the speeches. That's why whenever somebody has something to say, it's always Otto, like sitting in the hallway being like, all right, what about this thing?
Right, right.
um the other thing that they told me, and I don't know if this is true, or if this was just somebody told me, because this person didn't tell me, somebody else told me it was about this person. But they said the idea, I was very young and very young looking when I did it, was that Eli Addy, who is one of the writers, was writing at the time for Al Gore. And they said that, a lot of people in that writer room looked, and Eli looks incredibly young still, and they said a lot of people in that writer room were like him, and they were looking for kind of that kind of an energy, I think. Although I remember the audition room, and they definitely had all shapes, colors, age ranges. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what I was told when I went in. And so I remember thinking that that's where he came from, that he's a smart and sharp writer, and young enough that he had a little something to prove, but good enough that he had proven it this far.
Mm.
I think I think it's really interesting to think of Eli and the people that were writing on that season 7 being actual writers for presidents. And that's one of the things that's so fascinating about the West Wing, is how real it is from the writer's perspective. Lawrence O'Donnell writing for us, and Eli Addy writing, that like these are people in those rooms. These are in the room where it happened. Like that's Eli. So I thought it was that's where I was coming from. Like my jumping place was from, was from there. Like somebody who knows what he's doing, but it is just kind of getting a piece. I thought of the early West Wing stuff too, because I guess this would be where maybe Sam's role is, or maybe even maybe Sam's people's role, like maybe Janine was headed in that direction. Like I'm not sure, because she was not the speechwriter. Like she'd literally come to me for the speech writing. So but I would look at those, and even those backstories in those early West Wings, where they'd be going off being kind of the young people looking for Bartlett, and they were campaigning for Bartlett. And so I was looking for, like, where would I be in that? That's where I was getting the stuff that I found interesting.
Well, one interesting storyline where they felt like they introduced something kind of interesting, but then they kind of ignored it after. I'm kind of curious how you approach the scene in the storyline. On this first episode of Election Night, it goes beyond applying that Otto had a relationship with Louise, played by Gina Garofalo, and they, as mentioned that first episode, they refer to it later that episode, then they kind of forgot about it. So do you kind of wish they further explored that relationship? And did you think it was a relationship, or it was played like a fling?
I think it could be a relationship, and I think it could be something that could keep going. I liked that it was something that was mutual. I thought that was really cool. I liked that that Janine had a lot of power. I thought that was really cool. At the time, I don't recall seeing a lot of powerful women kind of taking their own sexuality like that, and still being professional, and still being treated like a pro by their partners, which I loved that, and I thought that was just felt really honest. And also probably felt honest for like campaign buses. Like I can see like that makes sense, like that whole idea, that scene. As far as whether it could have furthered, I think we were in this funny place at the time, because you know, the West Wing didn't get its marching orders to stop for a long time at the beginning. Like we could have kept going, and I don't know. Like this is just conjecture on my part, obviously. And maybe I've heard other people conjecture, but I feel like if we hadn't lost John, we might have had more juice for a while. You know, John was like he was like the den mother. You know, he really took care of everyone. He really was. You know, where there would be, you know, you'd have like the rambunctious part of the group, or you know, the sophomoric parts of the gang, and our dad and granddad figure. Like John's deal, like he was sort of the moral steerage of that boat. Even on the set, he was the guy who kind of kept you moving and really like inspired you to keep going, you know, and loved what he did, and was also a big theater actor. And you know, his death was a huge shock. He was so young, and it was so surprising. And I you know, I remember even that Christmas, or right before he died, that he was like, I think we've got time in us. You know, I think we got time for this. Like I remember him saying that, and I feel like maybe if he hadn't died, maybe we'd have more juice, you know. And then if that were the case, then I think why wouldn't you explore that that fascinating turn of events for everyone, you know? For Rhonda, for all of the others at that night, you know, everybody hooked up that night.
I mean, I think as a fan, I thought they were going to continue after Jimmy Smith, because I felt like they had established now the team. It's like, this has to go further. And that's why there was a rumor, that's still an active rumor now. I mean, it's been going on for years, that there was actually, if it wasn't for John Spencer dying, Vinnick was going to be the one who they had win the West Wing. That was a rumor that's been going on for a long time. It's been just you know, disproven many times, but it keeps popping up that was Vinnick who was supposed to have won. Because but I thought myself, they never would have done that. They had Santos set up so perfectly, they never was going to mess around with a Vinnick as the main character going forward in, you know, season 8, 9, 10. And I think because they set that up, and I think it would have been a perfect season 8.
I think, you know, it's interesting. I think what's interesting is what I remember hearing at the time was that the writers didn't know, you know, that they had it. And this is what I heard at the time. So it was also, you know, it's also rumor on my part, but like, I remember being on the set and being like, does anybody know what's happening? And they were like, well, we can tell you that we don't know. That and which you know, knowing some TV stuff and how writers' rooms work, that both options might have been on the table for a while, you know, because you could turn that script into a Vinnick win in one episode. You know, it happened so late in the seasons that you could turn that into a Vinnick win and still have the other episodes, you know.
Right.
There's so much you can do inside there. I think the Santos win, what's interesting about it is that you could have a Santos win and keep Vinnick in the picture. That there was already that idea that you can stay in this and you can keep doing this thing, and you know, and then you can keep him as like a piece. But I feel like I even asked Jimmy, and Jimmy was like, I got to tell you, man, we don't, they don't know, they won't tell me, we don't know. Oh. And he was like, wow, they really don't know. So like it's not, it was not in the cards. It was not in the cards that, you know, there was like a special Bible that everybody knew that this was going to happen. Like there's like, I don't think they were actually super concerned. Like there were no NDAs at the time. Like Lost hadn't come out. Like it wasn't a time where like you were doing that. So I think somebody would have said something, you know, even on the script. Now it's been so many years. I guess I'd be like, I could tell you right now. But honestly, I think like the way that I heard and the way that I experienced it, they had no idea. But I think if John was around, I think if John was around, they'd be like, we do it for John, you know? That's where I think. I feel like if John was around and he still wanted to do it, he was just that good and that interesting in what he did, and I feel like that storyline would have moved in a really interesting way.
Yes, I think so, because I think it allowed all the characters, especially Josh, Bradley Whitford, Josh, to develop in a way that felt just natural from his previous West Wing experience. And now you're the guy, because the whole point where I can't remember, there was even an episode where I think the president tells Josh, "You're the some people want to be the guy. You want to be the guy relies on." And now he got to be the guy. I was like, that was your growth. That was the character arc that we wanted to explore, and you missed it because you stopped, the show at that point.
Well, I feel like, and this again, conjecture on my part, I feel like, when I look back at shows now and I see like Grey's Anatomy for like 22 seasons or something like that, I always think like that could have been the West Wing. Like it could have been like that show where now you've gone through like 4 administrations,
Right.
And and like our administration would be gone in 4 years, and maybe they'd even think like, how do we keep this going? Like every 4 years we could change casts, it's true. Like there's something you could really do with a show like that. But I think, and I really don't know this, but I think it was expensive. At the time the show was being produced by Warner Brothers, right?
I think so.
It was before the WB, so Warner Brothers was produced. Yeah, it was definitely like, because we were at Warner Brothers shooting, so it was produced by Warner Brothers, and then it was sold to NBC, and that's an expensive proposition, where they're kind of buying one property to put on their thing, and it's a property that's won 1 billion Emmys, and it's and now like all those slightly unknown people at the beginning of your show have become the most important people in all of television. It becomes expensive, and I think that at the time, I don't know, I feel like maybe things were moving and they were like, I don't know, let's not move on with that, because I don't see why, if that happened in the last few years, why they wouldn't be like, we're just going to keep this rolling for a while.
Right.
It seems like there's no reason to not keep it going.
And I think interesting as well, especially nowadays, where the big thing now is to bring back the old shows. Roseanne, they brought back Mad About You. So many of these shows they brought back, and I think, I can't remember if it was Frasier, but they brought back a lot of these older shows. I think to myself, you have the West Wing. How are you not bringing that back? That was made to be brought back.
Yeah. I imagine they could. I feel like I always hear like that, and people like hitting the bushes and wondering about it. But my guess is if they brought it back, they'd bring it back with none of us. Maybe you'd end up with like Bradley giving a final farewell as the last president or something, and then you go on to a new thing, or like some sort of an arch. But they're like, well, we're not, I'm not going to bring the old group back. Or you do like, I don't know. Like I'd love to see it back again. But I think it's even a harder political climate to do something like that now, like at the time there was room for that kind of political talk to feel, even though the West Wing is definitely democratic and liberal, but to feel like it wasn't necessarily about being democratic or liberal,
Right.
That was just this situation. Of course, by the end, especially in season 7, it really did become about politics, and that's why it's such a fascinating season, because the world was moving in that direction. I found out that that George W. won his election in that van, in that van with like Bon Jovi. I feel like we were all there, or like we were driven by a church or something when we find. I'm gonna say that the second win, that's when we found out that we were all together. Like it was the cast thing, and we were listening to the radio. Like that's how long ago that was. Like I don't remember there being a phone. And I was like, no, there weren't any phones. I was like, all my photos from then are like from my little Canon camera. And yeah, so somebody was like listening to a radio, and we're like, oh, votes are in. And I remember like a fog, happening on the the actors camp here, but yeah. So I feel like politics has become its own crazy show now. That it would be hard to do this sort of a show about politics that was as open-hearted as this. Of course, you could send it back then. You could be like, let's take us back 20 years ago, and this is where we'll pick it up, so that you can get rid of a bunch of things and see like what these presidents would do.
Yeah, I remember making I think it was on Facebook. I made a comment. I can't remember the exact details of the comment, but I made something along the lines of, right, from considering how things work. I think I wrote this during the Trump administration, that during this period, Lord of the Rings feels less fictional than The West Wing, because like more like a fantasy than The West Wing feels more like a fantasy than Lord of the Rings, because the idea that you have all these young people with these positive ideas trying to change the world, and they're working with, they can make deals with the Republicans and negotiate. As like, this is a fantasy more than ever it was before.
Like, that doesn't happen anymore,
Right.
So I wonder what a show about a West Wing would be now. Would it, like, there's something interesting about the West Wing, whereas it never felt cynical. It was never about that. It always felt about like people serving a greater good, and really kind of like servants of the people, figuring out what it meant to be servants of the people. And the best versions, the Republicans on the show were always the best you could hope for Republicans, and the best you could hope for Democrats, and like you found these things where, and some of that might be in the writing, that it's all that everything's allegorical, or that it's that they're some of them are morality plays. But now you never get away from like the idea that how would that person not do this? How would this person not do that? But I got to say, like, what was interesting also about the West Wing was that it was these people with big responsibilities, with big power, but it wasn't necessarily about people with like a ton of money. There's so many shows today are sort of like, are about very important people in the media who drive nice cars and have great vacations, and it's very difficult to kind of go, do I care about that person? Do I care that person has a job and a ton of money and has issues? And the West Wing always felt a little blue collar. I'm not saying that the people who work in the West Wing make no money or anything, but the feeling of it feels like they're blue collar government workers, at a particular position.
Right.
And they have these responsibilities, and I feel like it's hard to find that again now. It's hard to find that without it being like, those are billion-dollar TV show personalities,
Right.
who are worried about their reputations, and you're like, it's good, but you're like, is that enough? Is that, or in the end, am I just going to be like, oh, well, I got $1 billion, and this one was sort of like, well, the fate of the world rests on these guys,
Well, I agree completely. I feel like if they did it now, like you said, the idea of being cynical, because back in the West Wing, you get the sense these people they got the job, they became, they worked in the White House because they want to do good things for people. They honestly want to do good things. Nowadays, I don't think people would bought into that. Now, the show came out now, the people are like, that's not why they would have done it. It was for power, it was for greed, it was for this other stuff. I think people would have had a hard time buying into people just doing the right thing because it's right.
Well, I feel like there are very smart writers who know how to kind of like surf the line so that you will be able to feel both of those things. I think a property like the West Wing is a hard line to surf because because of the history it has behind it. But if anyone were to pick up that mantle, I feel like that would be where they would have to surf, somewhere inside of that. Maybe the person who wins is the person who did fight against cynicism. Maybe that is the way. It's like the Obama win. And also what's very interesting about the final season of the West Wing, with the idea that it happened before the Obama win, is is fascinating.
Mm.
That all of that stuff wasn't cribbed from the headlines or anything. It was, made out of the imaginations of these people. And I feel like that would be the job of the next, the next Sorkin or Sorkin,
Right.
he could go and swing again. Like, I'm sure he knows how to like find that way in.
Do you think something like The West Wing with Santos? I don't know if maybe this is giving too much credit. Like I love the show, but giving too much credit. That's the having Santos as the president or when as president helped pave the way, and people find like thinking about this as being something that can happen when it was time for Obama to run. People said, so it helped pave the way for people to think to themselves, yeah, I can definitely see someone, a non-white dude become president. I wonder if that helped make it not acceptable is not the right word, but believable that could happen.
Well, if anything, I think it definitely put it into the zeitgeist. I think it definitely, when it can, especially television at that time, television at that time, everybody knew. Like you all knew what happened on the last thing of the West Wing. Everybody knew. It's not like now where there's great television for sure and tons of good shows, but not everybody's watching the same stuff. It doesn't necessarily creep into the consciousness of society. If you said that about a show now, you'd be like, God, I mean, maybe, well, The Handmaid's Tale from West Wing alumni, like stuff like that. Like, sure, that could creep in, and that definitely has it, but there's not that many. And then at the time, any show that was as big as The West Wing really had the possibility of laying something into the consciousness, so I think it could have led to that. Definitely, like, I didn't see Obama as a possibility, and I don't think I watched The West Wing was like, oh yeah, he's a possibility. I just think that he embodied this sort of like anti-cynicism that was so real in The West Wing, that maybe people maybe they connected to that. I mean, then, really more power to the West Wing writers if they made that happen.
I just think that's how things happen. I mean, people can say whatever they want about entertainment, but entertainment moves culture. It changes perception.
What do we fight arts for? What do we fight
right
for, right?
Right, exactly.
It's for this art, this thing that we do. This is, especially in this country, even though the government doesn't necessarily support it, like it's not that kind of art here, but it's our number one export. And what we do, including this, what we're doing right now, like this is our number one export.
Right.
These arts, the creativity, that's what we do as a country. It's funny that the country doesn't like to recognize it, that there's nothing wrong with anybody else's job, but that they spend a lot of time subsidizing farmers, which is good, but there's also there are also working class actors. There's working class people producing stuff, and in the end, California is like the third largest economy, and entertainment is a big part of that.
Right.
And not entertainment, the arts, that this is, we fight wars so you can go home and watch TV, and you love the TV.
Right.
So
right.
It's so sad to me the way that, like, the arts are so denigrated, or can be, inside of as like a dessert,
Right.
You're like, but really, like, you consume it like it's the main course. Like, and when people are like, oh, you work to live, and I was like, what do you do when you live? You go get entertained, you go see some art. And if it's not, say, the art of actors or the art of this, you're going to a great hotel somewhere. Like, there's an architect who did that thing. There are designers that created that. You're in a pool and it didn't just like come.
Right.
Like, all this stuff are artists. Anyway, I don't know why I got on that.
No, I agree with it, and I think I'm amazed. I do a lot of these shows, a lot of these interviews, and I talk to a lot of actors, and a lot of them have said the same thing, which is people are now respect entertainment even more because of COVID. Because when you're down,
now
you're
they do, you're right.
right. When you're in the rut, you're this depression, concern, anxiety. Where did you turn? You're at home. You probably were watching TV. You're watching movies, or on your computer doing something. But entertainment got us through COVID in some way.
Yeah, I actually think it did remind everybody. I mean, like the audiobook jump, was actually a really big, it's a really big example of that. The idea that all of a sudden people who are spending time alone wanted to hear stories makes you realize that like people want to hear stories, and those people realize like I want to hear these stories. That it's gone are the days where audiobooks aren't reading anymore. Now people will give full-on book reviews on NPR from books they've listened to, and I think that's amazing, and I think that's great for authors. I think that's great for publishing. I think it's great for listeners, readers.
I agree. I agree 100%. There was a tweet by Neil Gaiman, who's one of my favorite writers of all time. I think the guy's just a genius. Sandman for anyone who doesn't know him, but not know Netflix.
I haven't seen it yet. Is it great?
Oh my god, it's so. I mean, I'm such a fan. I have all the regular issues. I have I have all the absolute volumes of the issue, and Netflix came the closest I would ever imagine to hitting it right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not perfect. There's some things I think to myself, why did they do this or that? But it's so close to hitting the comic book better than I ever would have imagined it would have.
Oh, then I need to.
Right. Definitely. Yes. 100%. Definitely do it. The quote I was talking about, Neil Gaiman said, he made a comic because someone complained about the audiobooks does not count as reading. And he said, listening to an audiobook is 100% reading. It's the same thing. And I thought to myself, he's 100% right. It is very much the same thing. It's still enjoying the story and understanding the words and everything else. And I think it was a very interesting tweet that he made about that.
It takes place inside your mind.
Yeah.
It is the beginning of storytelling. I feel like good audiobooks is changing the publishing industry, and it's changing writers, and I can tell because I work with some independent writers, and you could see that at a certain point at the beginning of their writing path, you'd have these long sentences that were created and twisted and turned and and buttoned at the end, and then they'd have to hear that sentence or they'd have to read that sentence out loud, and they're like, you can't do that. And it helps you kind of remember that the reading and telling a story has to be tellable. That it's much more there's something more connective when you think like this should be read out loud. This isn't like something somebody should like sit at home and try to parse. And even when they're thinking of their heroes, I think of like Shakespeare, the way Shakespeare does it, like Shakespeare, you can parse that, you can look in there and you can turn it into something that is manageable.
Right.
As some writers are like, you didn't give me a period, and it's like an entire paragraph of one one sentence, and I don't know, but I feel like it changes. It's changing literature.
I agree 100%. Once again, I don't know if Gaiman said it or not, but the stories were first told orally.
Yep.
That is our understanding of storytelling. I mean, you can, even if you don't want to say it's literally reading, if you want to say reading, it can only be defined as looking at the words on the page. It's still the same storytelling as reading a book. It's done the same way. It's how well, I mean, I would imagine storytelling has been going on longer orally than ever written at this point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's been more actors than writers.
Right. Well, I agree. I mean, like I said, well before we ever had anything on the page in the first book written, thousands of years, but people were telling the stories orally. It's a much older form, and it's been doing it longer than writing will ever have done it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Before I know it's late, but I want to ask one more question about the West Wing. Okay. So one thing that always has bothered me about the West Wing, and I want you to clarify it as the best, most knowledgeable person I've talked to about the West Wing and Otto, because it's all about Otto. This has bothered me since I've loved West Wing. They've never, ever specifically stated that Otto had the job in the administration. Josh said a couple of times this is not how you're going to get the job. He said that a few times in season 7. He kind of dangled in front of him a few times, but he never in the show ever stated that he actually got the job in the administration. In your opinion, did they finally give it to him later on, or did Josh screw with him this entire time?
I think he had it. I think the idea was he has the job on the staff of the what's it called, the while they're running the campaign staff, right?
The campaign staff, yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. So he had the job and the campaign staff, and I think the dangling was like, just because you were on the campaign doesn't mean you're going to be in the office. Although I think usually it does, especially if like your speeches won an office,
Yeah.
and I feel like there was some tweakage to be done there. And obviously, like, he himself has, likes to play those games. But I feel like by the end, when we're unpacking stuff, we already have the jobs. I guess you could have the jobs gotten rid of. I didn't lose his cell phone; it was my fault. That's why I feel like there's actually a job there, and I'm just getting yelled at. I don't ever think that he was in danger of not having the job he had. It just might not have been pleasant. Or it might have had a bad office, or he might have been at odds with Josh for a bit.
Now, do you think he got Toby's job or Sam's job?
Josh?
Otto. Do you think he ended up with Toby's job and was the head speechwriter, or do you think he was Sam's deputy speechwriter or communications?
I think it was Sam's job.
Sam's job?
Yeah. I think, I feel like Otto was always, or at least in this, was always it's kind of how I saw Sam. He's like the guy who's going to put the flowers in the words. They're like, okay, I got all the bullet points. How do I make it sing? And I feel like that's what he was doing. Where I feel like Janine would have been in the other position, where she could figure out the communications and figure out where everything belonged and could, get the strategy moving. Otto would be the one, making the words work.
I really wish there was at least one scene though where you had Otto go into Sam's office from the original West Wing and start setting up. I think that would have been the nice way to end it for the character.
Oh, I thought about that so often. I did. I was always like, oh, come on, let's have it.
It was deserved. He was such a good character. It felt like they owed it to the character to give him that one moment where they said, okay, after Josh gave him so much shit, you gotta at least say at the end, give it to Otto. He's in the office. It's all good for him. It worked out.
Yeah, I mean, so much of these things, you don't know what happens or how, because, the other thing was, at the same time, I was shooting another TV show, and the producers at the West Wing were amazing to me. I was shooting another TV show in Vancouver, and they were letting me fly back and forth to do this thing. So for all I know, they were like, you know what, we could have Ramon do this thing where he walks into he might be in Vancouver that week, like it could have been that. Like, I remember, I don't know, it's such an interesting time in my career. Like, I remember I was on 2 of these shows, and I was recurring, and it was really interesting roles. And it very much felt like if either show went, then I would have to keep on with the show, which is a great problem. And neither went, which is how it usually goes.
Yes.
in this town, still standing, still throwing my punches here, but
right.
That's how it goes. So you never know how that one went. But I did have that same hope. I was like, oh, that'd be great. Even for all of us, there were all these different staffers I feel like you really took a ride with on that in that show, that you were like, oh, I'd love to see them, start where we've seen, just like we saw at the beginning of the original West Wing.
Yep.
That's what I would have loved to see, like a callback to all of that.
It could have ended with you with the prostitute, just like Sam did with getting a call from POTUS.
That's right. Fell off a bike again.
But like I
Otis
said,
is on a hoverboard.
but like I said, Otto was such a good character. He did such a great job with it that I really wish they continued and did more with him later.
Oh yeah, that would have been great. That would have been great.
So what are you working on now or next?
Well, I just closed Hamlet, so I took some time off, and I spent the past few months on a bunch of commercials. I've done, I think, 4 different commercials that keep airing, so that's good. But the only thing I really have like inside, like inserted in my like time slots are audio things, and tons of them. Like I'm almost through my year in the booth, and what I do is I record all year long, and then as the TV and film work comes in, I just shut down the recording, go do the TV and film work, and then catch up. And I feel like the biggest thing that's coming up in the next few months is another installment of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series,
Very cool.
which is a huge series for kids, obviously. But I think we're on book 16,
Oh wow.
something like that. Yeah, and one of the biggest selling books in history. Definitely in the kids' books. Yeah, but I'm looking at a slate of 4 or 5 sci-fi books and the YA books and the novels,
Very
and
cool.
a bunch of other voice projects that I've signed NDAs for. So I was just like, oh, I could tell you about this, and I was like, oh no, I can't tell you about those two. But yeah, I'm always working and hoping that another script like that one comes along, and it will. I get to do like little pieces here and there, and it'll come.
Well, sir, you're always welcome back on the show to talk about it. You really have been a great pleasure to talk with. And like I said, Otto is one of my favorite characters on one of the shows that is.
Thank you so much. We'll talk Shakespeare next time.